Dementia is a very sad sickness.
The person is physically there, but no longer mentally there.
My name is Isabella Di Matteo. I'm 17 years old, and 2 years ago, my grandfather began to show symptoms of dementia. His mental state deteriorated very quickly. It felt like he became a stranger within a couple of months. The whole dynamic in my family had changed. His sickness affected us all in the worst ways. In September of 2018, when I had to start a personal project, I was asked what mattered to me. What do I want to add to this world? I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know what to do at first, but I did know that my family, along with millions of others, were suffering from dementia. I wanted people to know about it, to understand that dementia doesn't just affect the one person who has it, but everyone else around them. So, I started this project, The Many Faces of Dementia, for my grandfather, for my family, and for all the other families suffering. Dementia is the general term for a decline in cognitive functions, which is caused by many different diseases or brain injuries. Mental functions including memory, communication and language, the ability to focus and pay attention, reasoning and judgment, and visual perception are impaired when someone has dementia. There are many different types of dementia: vascular, frontotemporal, Huntington's disease, etc. But the most common form is Alzheimer's. Michael Zanetsis, my grandfather. He's 81 years old and is in the advanced stages of mixed dementia. He currently stays at a residence where he is under semi-autonomous care. Persephone Apostolakos. Her father suffers from vascular dementia. Christina Zanetsis, my aunt. She was the primary caregiver of my grandfather before he was placed in a residence. Ivani Bond, a worker at the Alzheimer's Society in the South Shore of Montreal. She works in the family counseling department. Karine Lebrun, the owner and primary caregiver at Résidence des Rosiers, a residence where my grandfather stays for seniors with cognitive disorders like dementia. When did the symptoms of dementia begin?
It's hard to pinpoint an exact time. I think, in our experience, once you've received a diagnosis, you start to look back and realize that certain behaviors were probably associated with this. But I would say that so he's 88 right now. The last probably 10 years of his life were probably the beginning, the onset of it.
When we brought him to the hospital, it was February of this year, but what we found out in the end is that the symptoms were there for quite some time. We just didn't realize.
What were the symptoms?
I think that the most prominent symptom was the fact that he would get very anxious driving at night. And at first we thought, he's been driving his entire life. Why would something like this make him anxious? And he would refuse to go to places that were far or that he didn't know that well, and he didn't want to go out. So I think that was what we didn't know at the time, but looking back, I think that was one of the first symptoms for him. Losing keys and things like that, it happens to so many people that I wouldn't consider that an evident sign.
Number one was forgetfulness, and the biggest symptom was that. He was having a lot of anxiety. He was not interested anymore in. I think he had a bit of depression at the same time because he probably didn't understand what he was feeling, all these feelings that he had. Other symptoms, headaches, dizziness, fatigue, confusion, a lot of confusion. And he would forget simple things to eat, just to have a meal. Like if he ate, we'd ask him, so what did you eat? And he didn't remember. Or he'd forget to eat. So things like that.
Do you think that he was aware that he was losing cognitive function?
No.
He
He's
never
still not
voiced it?
aware. He's in denial. He thinks that he's just sick. He feels that pretty soon he'll be feeling better, and that he won't have to have the special care that he's having today. So he's in denial.
I don't think early on he knew what was happening. I know that maybe 2 years ago he and I were having a conversation, and he was having a bad day, and I said, what's wrong? And he said, he tapped his head. He said, I can't remember things. I know things, but I can't remember things. So I think there is an awareness of the limitations in speech, of the limitations in the freedom of his movement. So yeah, I do.
What are the most demanding needs that some of the residents have?
The most demanding needs is basically convincing them that they did everything that they could for their family. They feel sometimes very useless because they say, I abandoned my family. Where is my family? I want to be with my family. So these are, it's more emotional needs. This is the hardest need that need to be fulfilled by us.
What needs does your father have, and how does he rely on others to take care of him?
He needs special care. He needs the people to make sure that he's well fed and takes his medication. He needs, I think, a lot of attention. He needs to be watched almost 24/7. He is getting that now at a residence, so they take care of him full time. It was too much of a job for my mom, who is not in the best of health, so we opted for him to stay in a residence so that they can take care of him. Yeah.
So he's at a point now where he has some good days, but some really bad days where I can give you an example. Food is put in front of him and he'll say, how do I eat this? So it's I think, watching everyday things that we take for granted, like knowing how to put food in your mouth to nourish your body, and he doesn't understand. He knows that he should take this in, but how should he take it in? Or something as basic as dressing himself. So there are times where he'll come downstairs and he's cold, so he understands that he needs to layer, but he'll wear like 3 shirts, one on top of the other. He's taken care of by my mom, so they're at home together, and we're very fortunate for that. So he's I wouldn't say he's resistant, but I think it's frustrating to be told not to do something. He owned a restaurant, so he was an avid cook. That was his place. And so now, because he doesn't understand what he's putting into foods, he's asked to come away from there. So my mom is constantly following, making sure that he's safe, making sure that something is not going to happen that shouldn't happen. he's very much at home. He doesn't like to go out. If we do go out, he's always accompanied by one of us. He's never left alone, just in case he ends up getting lost.
Dementia is most commonly categorized through 3 different stages. First, the mild early stage, where symptoms are hardly noticeable. Second, the moderate or middle stage. At this point, dementia symptoms are very obvious, and the sickness makes it difficult to maintain a healthy, independent lifestyle. Third, the severe, advanced, or late stage, where dementia now affects almost all aspects of the sufferer's life. Eventually, it reaches the point where they lose the ability to communicate.
How has their state worsened over time? And what stage of dementia is he at now?
I would say that he's no longer has mild dementia. I've given you a few examples. Eating, there are times where he just sits there and looks and wonders how to take it in. His independence is totally gone. He'll still dress himself, but he needs help being told what to put on. It's a very different life for a man that ran his own life and made his own decisions. It's very different now to be told constantly what he has to do on a daily basis.
Well, from February to today, it's gone from mild to advanced. It's worsened, and it's accelerating quite fast.
If your parents' dementia reaches the stage of severe dementia, where things like not being able to communicate and needing full-time care are necessary, how would your family go about his treatment? Would it stay the same?
I think I can't answer, I can't give a fair answer to that question right now, because I don't know what it would be like. I don't know how difficult it would become for her, and I don't think it would be fair to her to have to deal with that situation. At the same time, we'd have to respect her wishes and know how she wants to care for him. So, like I said before, if it's a day-by-day process. As we see that it worsens, I think we'll have to start discussing options and considering whether placement somewhere is necessary or whether we can continue to care for him at home, but with some level of assistance so that he doesn't have to leave his space.
What are some ways to prevent or delay Alzheimer's as well as other forms of dementia?
So everything we do for our general health is good to prevent Alzheimer's disease. There are also some programs that can be done to have brain training. There are many applications now on phones and computer that can be used for that too.
Dementia can also be prevented by staying mentally active and by socializing frequently. Research has shown how high social engagement prevents or delays dementia.
What are the treatment options available for patients with Alzheimer's?
There are some medications that are available. There is also all the non-medication treatment like stimulation. Some activities like what is offered here in our day center is also recommended. And there are all the good life habits that can be also applied to maintain a good general health and try to reduce the symptoms of the disease.
Does your dad take any medication to alleviate the symptoms that come with dementia, or any medication to slow down the process of losing cognitive functions like memory and judgment?
Yep, he was seen by a neurologist who prescribed the memory pill, they call it. There's a name for it, I don't know what it is, which he took after 3 months. He stopped because it was giving him a lot of dizzy spells. He wasn't feeling very well with this medication, so they took him off of it. So for the moment, he's not taking When he was taking it, we noticed a slight change, but not very much. Probably didn't take it long enough to see change.
So he is on a medication, and I apologize, I can't remember the name right now. And we were told that when he started this medication, it's actually a patch that he wears every night, that it would not reverse the process. So we should never have that expectation that it doesn't always work. What we did notice was for a period of time, he actually was somewhat more stable. And so his dose had been increased. Obviously, it's not going to reverse, but the stage that he was at was a stage where we could still have some conversations, and his good days outnumbered the bad. He was meant to go on to the third dose, but I think the way the government program works, they don't pay for the highest dose because not enough research backs up the reason to have that being provided to patients. So on the recommendation of his doctor, he stayed at the second dose. Okay. I don't think that it's working anymore.
Studies have shown that caregivers of dementia patients experience lower immunity, fatigue, and increased risk for illnesses. In your experience, do you find this to be true?
If the health caregiver is not taking care of herself or himself, yes, they will get sick because it's extremely demanding.
Do you feel emotionally connected with these residents, or do you see them more as clients?
We cannot become emotionally attached to the client because it would drive us to a big depression.
Do you ever have to distance yourself from these residents as you don't want to become too emotionally attached?
Yes, it does happen that sometimes we go overboard, we feel very attached, we want to help as much as we can. Yes, there is time I need to retrieve myself. It is very important for my own sanity and to be able to continue my work. You cannot stay all the time in the residence here and not change your mind. It's not healthy, first of all. You need to have, and I go, for example, walk outside near the trees, near the forest, or do something that relax me, you know. I have to take care of myself first to be able to take care of the clients.
What motivated you to get into this field of work, knowing that it would be so physically and emotionally demanding?
Well, there's a huge needs in our society. I mean, we go in, for example, in a senior residence, and people are sitting like eating by themselves. Their head is down, and you say, well, how come these people are sitting by themselves? How come nobody's feeding them? Because they need help, obviously. So basically, I said, I can do it. I can contribute. I can help. I can do this.
Do you think some people wouldn't be able to do this job? And what are some necessary qualities one would need to be a caregiver?
No, not everybody can be a caregiver for different reasons. Reasons of their history, their background. If they get too emotional with the clients, we cannot, let this person because it will affect their judgment because they're going to get too emotional, and the judgment gets affected when you don't put your limits, as a caregiver. For example, an employee who has multiple history of depression, unfortunately, I don't think it would be a good candidate for my clientele because the clientele needs to be taken care of. Also physically, some people are not capable of physically, for example, to change a pull-up to the client. You need to be in a certain health. You have to love working with senior people.
In your experience, how does dementia affect the family members' lives?
A lot. In a couple, for example, all the relationship tends to change. They used to be a team, and now they are more of a caregiver and someone who needs help. They try to maintain the relationship, but as the communication changes with the disease, it may be harder on them. They also have to support, take care while seeing the person changing and sometimes not recognizing who they used to be, so that may be hard on them. It's a really complex situation for families. We often say that it's a family disease, Alzheimer's, because it affects everyone.
Has it become harder to be around him since his condition got worse?
So there are days when my own life can be crazy and I'm having to deal with something at work or in the family, and I don't have the patience that I should have. And so I'll need to remind myself that this is a person who is suffering from something that is entirely out of his control. So I think it's only on those days that I feel that it's harder, because I make sure to speak to him every day, and often our conversations within the span of, let's say, half an hour, I get asked the same questions 5 times. But I always say to myself that, for him, it's probably new information every time. He doesn't remember what he asked. So I always think that I should be thankful for the fact that we can still speak, and that he still knows who I am, and that we still have a connection.
Yeah, he has some behavioral issues, and I think that has to do with his character. Very stubborn person in the first place. So, and unfortunately, he had a dependence on alcohol practically his whole life. So now that he's not allowed to or able to, that he cannot afford to take alcohol, he's misbehaving a lot more than he used to. It's a mood thing, I guess. He's not very happy. He's a very frustrated person. So to be around him, it's difficult. Complains a lot. He says he doesn't. If you say hi, how are you, he'll tell you, I'm not feeling well. So you could tell he's angry. I'm not sure. I don't think he knows why. I think he's confused about that. But in general, I guess he has his good days and bad days too, because there's been times where you can have a conversation with him and he's fine, seems normal, and then it switches. Within minutes, he's somebody else. So, yeah.
What is the hardest part about having a parent with dementia?
The hardest part is watching somebody that was responsible for you, that took care of you, that gave you advice, that looked after you, that now you have to be that person for them. That's one part, but I think what's hit me the hardest is that the realization that you spend an entire lifetime building a life. So learning, building memories, creating skills. You become this person who can do so many things, and that all that through this illness is taken away piece by piece to the point where it's almost as if you didn't have a life.
For me, when I think of my dad who has dementia, I feel sad because he's clearly not the same person. And I guess I also fear the day that he doesn't know who I am, that he doesn't remember me. For the moment he does. But like he'll walk in my house and he'll say, whose house is this? And there's sometimes where he'll come in my house and he'll know. So it's up and down.
How has your parents' dementia affected your kids, and how did they react to this decline in his well-being?
I think the kids didn't see it early on, or it didn't affect them as much. you know, he was still my dad. He still did the same things, like always telling them, you know, you should eat or comb your hair or things like that. So early on, it wasn't. It didn't impact, but I think now, as they see this, it's hard for them. It's hard to watch this person that they love go through these changes. And I think their big worry is that, I know that my father's an older man, but at the same time, their understanding that he's ill makes them wonder how much longer he has and to what state will develop, and will they still be able to communicate with him? Will he still recognize them? So I think those are questions that are constantly on their mind.
My kids are accepting of the diagnosis. They feel sorry for my dad when they see him. They do anything to make him comfortable. They're sad for me, mostly. They feel bad about how I feel. You know, they love their grandfather. They're not as close as I wanted them to be, but overall, they're sad about the whole thing. Yeah, I think they also question about the hereditary, the genetic part of it, and they ask questions like if it means that one of us will have it as well.
Through my research, I've learned of some common emotions that family members experience, including guilt, grief, loss, and anger. How do you relate with some of these emotions? And if so, what are some ways of coping that you've adapted?
I relate to every single one. Grief, because the person is physically there, but no longer mentally there. He's still physically my dad. I see him like this little Greek man that I've adored for my entire life. But mentally, it's very different. So I can't share stories with him from when I was younger, because that's not always there. I can't have conversations with him about my work, about things that are important to me, because it's not registering, or he won't remember that we had those conversations. Although there are odd things that he remembers and hangs on to, and so every now and then I have this hope that it's not going as fast as we think it is. Anger, because we can't stop it. It's like you're totally helpless. Frustration, because of the life that he and my mom are leading now. I feel like every day is a struggle. So I think you run through all the emotions, and how do I cope? He's gone through times where my dad becomes incredibly funny. I don't think intentionally. He'll blurt out observations on things which I find really funny, and I think that I've told myself that I'll take what I can have, and if that's what I can have right now, then I'll take it. And you know, it's, I think when you have the little moments, the good moments, where you see them smile, where they feel at peace in your presence and they're okay and they're not worried, that's how you have to cope. You can't constantly think of how's he going to be tomorrow, how's he going to be next month. I think you just have to take this day by day.
well, with him, yeah, when I'm having a conversation with him, it could be quite frustrating talking to him. Sometimes there's, a fight because he's demanding to come home, or he's demanding to go somewhere, or demanding to be alone, that he is convinced that he can take care of himself, that he doesn't need anybody. So it's hurtful. He doesn't understand, or he doesn't want to. Like I said before, he's in denial. So yeah, that is quite frustrating, and it angers us sometimes. Yeah. I think the grieving part happened at the very beginning, because for now, I don't feel that I'm grieving for anything. Loss, yeah, I think that's the sadness that I have. Dementia is a very sad sickness. My father, when he was first diagnosed, I was extremely sad, of course, and wanting to help. So what I ended up doing is I ended up having my father come and live with me, which lasted for 3 months. And so I got to understand and learn a lot about the disease, and trying to help my father out as best I could. And there were some challenging times there because he was testing me, and at times I was regretting wanting to help, or that I was helping, as it was very, very hard. But in the end, I'm very happy that I did it, because I got to really understand what he's going through and understand the disease and what it's going to be much later on in the future. I'm ready for that. I guess I think when your parent has dementia, you have to continue doing the research, reading up on how to react to certain things, how to act for certain things, and just be patient, as it's very testing.
Statistics show that approximately 564,000 Canadians are living with dementia, and the Canadian Institutes of Health and Research invests only 5% of their budget toward dementia. Do you think there isn't enough being done to find better treatments and a cure for dementia in Canada?
Well, I think so. I think we would need a lot more money to go on with that. It's a complex disease. I know that it's hard to have researches. We need time and money, and sometimes, maybe we don't have enough, even though a lot of efforts are done.
Yeah.
I think if the budget is that low, then no. I think it's an illness that's impacting all of us. So if it's something that is affecting the elderly population, and everybody will continue to, not continue, but everybody will experience that at some point in their lives, then we need to look into it, because it's not only the person who is ill, but it's the people that are taking care that are going through very hard times. And so we can't just, invest a small percentage of monies into research when this is going to affect many people eventually. It already has. It's just going to get worse.
What are the services you offer to help family members?
Well, we try to reach them by, for example, some conference that we offer in different places. So trying to join the general population and preventing, so that they know that we are there, that we have services that can help them if they are touched with that. We also have training workshops for caregivers, so where we present what is the disease, how we communicate with the person, the different behaviors that can appear. We present the services, the legal aspect, so we really give them a toolkit to go on with the disease.
How can we help raise awareness and concern about dementia to society?
Well, I think that people are getting more and more at ease to speak about it. Families are more at ease to speak to other people, talk about what it means. I think that media is also a good way.
What do you hope to see changed regarding dementia treatment as well as support for families in the next decade?
I think that if I speak for caregivers, they would really like to have a better treatment, because by now we delay the disease but we don't cure it. So
Yeah.
this is the hope everybody has. Concerning services, I think that we're trying to develop more and more, but still there are so many cases that sometimes I don't know if we have enough services for them. Especially for support caregivers need to make it possible that they stay at their place with their family.
Yeah.
It's really hard to reach on those services. There are waiting lists.
Yeah. What advice could you give to any caregivers or family members affected by dementia?
I think that asking help, contact the different organism where we can have support information about the disease and how we can deal with that may be a little easier, because we haven't necessarily been exposed to that before, and we may not know how to deal with that or cope with different situations. And sometimes in group situation, for example, just to know that you're not alone in that, and that other people are living the same thing as you do.
My advice to all those who have a loved one with dementia, whether you're a family member, a spouse, or a friend, is to make the most out of the time you have with them. Don't spend all of your time together wishing that they didn't have dementia. Just be there with them in the moment and make the most out of it. Also, you have to remember that their sickness is not your fault or their fault, and it's out of your control. If you feel overwhelmed, it's okay to ask for help. There are so many resources out there for people in this situation. Helplines, family counseling, support groups. Whichever way you choose to deal with the hardships that come with having a loved one with dementia, just remember you're not alone.